a great episode lined up for you guys. People were able to ask me about mental health. I really enjoy doing these segments. If you want to join in on my live podcast, don't forget Mondays and Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find me live streaming on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope. All you got to do is search Celeste the Therapist. If you want to support the podcast, I have a few ways you can do that. You can share this episode with somebody that you love. If you listen to me on Apple Podcasts, do me a favor and rate me where you listen to podcasts. You can also join me on Patreon. This is a place where people go where they can support people that they really enjoy. And also there's a lot of different perks that you can benefit from. Also, I have 2 books out, 365 Days of Intentional Living, which is a guided journal. And in that journal, I ask you different questions every single day. I also have a book called Relationship Goals, which is a guide to a healthy relationship. You can find those at celestethetherapist.com. Last but not least, I have a community where there is a wait list for the community. It starts in January, called Shifting the Way You Think. I am using a book called Reconciliation, Healing the Inner Child, where we are going to go through this book. There is going to be weekly homework, video lessons, monthly live workshops from me. And this is a really powerful community. If you're somebody that's feeling stuck, looking for a community, looking to work on your healing, definitely check it out, shiftingthewayouthink.com. And if you want to be a part of the show and be a guest, all you got to do is email me, admin@celestethetherapist.com. All right, let's get into this amazing episode. And when you really think about it, it's like, how could we really run away from our mind? Like, how could you run away from something that's a part of you?
365 days, but I treat every day like it's my last. I'm only concerned with building on the future, cause I can't change my past. Positive vibes for positive lives. She just giving you that truth and shifting your mind. It's more mental than you realize. It's up to you to take control, cause this world is cold and negativity gon' take its toll. Now we've been told any day could be your last. I'm embracing every moment and I cherish every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste the Therapist. Let's go.
Hello, beautiful people. So if you have never been in here before, my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I come on, I talk to people that are doing things to empower the lives of others by sharing their story. So I have this podcast I started a couple years ago. It's called Celeste the Therapist Podcast, where I talk to people who are doing things to empower the lives of others. And then I also come on, I talk about issues that we go through, and then I kind of think about ways in which we can deal with it, because all of us are kind of going through some things, especially during this pandemic. So when the pandemic started, I decided to come on live back in March. So from about March to July, come on and I would talk about these things that we have been dealing with. And then it's been a really great journey. Hey, Maurice. So I am streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. So I would love to know where you are streaming in from. And if you are listening to this on the audio, make sure you subscribe to me on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope if you want to check out the visuals and learn a little bit more about me. So you guys can ask me anything about mental health. These are segments I used to do a couple years ago where I would come on, hey, from Vegas. Oh, you're in Vegas. These segments I would do a few years ago on Periscope on Fridays. I would come on and people would ask me all of these different questions about mental health, which kind of birthed the book, my guided journal that I created. So I created this guided journal because people would talk about not being able to kind of process and not really understanding how to start the process. So I created this journal right here. And then I would do these segments on relationships. And so that birthed relationship goals and where I talk about how you can work on creating a healthy relationship for yourself and your partner. One of the things from Flint, Michigan. Hey, Jerry, how are you? So Today, a lot of people are developing, hey, Kira, mental health So one of the questions are, it sounds like you're saying a lot of people are developing mental health issues, or have they gotten worse? I feel like a lot of people that may be struggling now, it's not that the struggle that they're feeling is new. It's more so now that we are kind of forced to deal with the issues that we have because there's not a lot of distractions. So I think that's what we're seeing a lot in this time frame now. And so a lot of things that are going on inside of us, unfortunately, we have not been taught how to deal with it. And so that's why we kind of struggle. Hey, Teresa, I'm doing good, Jerry. Thanks for asking. So you guys can ask your questions, but I do want to kind of go over a quick topic. And so if it's important to you, I feel like you'll find a way. And if it's not, you'll find an excuse. So I guess my question to you is, how important are you to yourself, especially when you think about some of the struggles you're having or some of the goals that you're not accomplishing? I think a lot of times if we think about all of the energy we put into other people or the energy we put into other things, we will see that we give a lot of ourselves. And a lot of times we tend to put ourselves last on the totem pole. And, you know, a lot of times that happens because like we were taught. And when I say we were taught, it's not like somebody sat down with me and said, like, Celeste, it's important for you to put other people first. But if you see that behavior taking place growing up, then you learn, like, we develop these systems within our own brain where we kind of learn how to operate. And it's not that somebody's telling us, but we learn how to make it make sense. And for some people, the way they've made things make sense is that they've sacrificed themselves. So, you know, it's important to really think about, am I sacrificing myself? Am I putting myself first, regardless of if you have children or you have a spouse or, you know, whoever's in your life. You know, if you're not here, then they will have to find somebody else to support them. But if you're not putting yourself first, you're not going to be any good for anyone else. So that's something that is important to understand. So one of the things I talk about with this idea is like a solution. Like if you're somebody that feels you do not put yourself first or you've always done everything for everyone else, you're not going to find motivation. It's something that has to be created through your environment. Maurice says it's ingrained in our minds to put other first. Yes, so it is ingrained in our minds. And a lot of the thing in our mind that's taking place is not even a process that we're a part of. And that's something that you have to understand, whether or not you want to acknowledge what you're feeling or going through internally. It doesn't matter if you're going to be a part of the process. The process continues to happen without your consent. It's something I say a lot, and it's important. And for me, once I realize that, like once I say that in my head, I am going to be a part of the process because I understand that we are going to be having these emotions or we're going to be feeling these things. I want to know what's happening inside of me. Unfortunately, a lot of us are manifesting our behaviors, whether it's our relationships, the things that we're doing, our goals that we're not accomplishing. A lot of that's happening because you're not being a part of what's happening up here, which is why I always say, like, you know, your thoughts contribute to how you feel, and how you feel contributes to your behavior. So if you're not in tune with what's happening up here, you can try to work on your behavior, but your behavior is not going to be consistently changed if you don't understand what you're thinking about the situation, what you're thinking about yourself. So that's something that's important to understand. In order to like work on yourself, you got to put yourself first. You got to develop some form of consistency and also gratitude. Gratitude is something that's extremely important. When I am able to look at the little things that are happening, it really takes the focus off of the other things that may feel really hard. And that's something, you know, you think about people in third world countries, how is it that they're able to smile the way they do? And a lot of times it's because they learn how to practice the spirit of gratitude. In America, we don't do that. We don't practice gratitude. That's something that we are always looking at what we don't have. And so if I'm only looking at what I don't have, why wouldn't I feel miserable? And a lot of times the way that, you know, we can have peace, we don't look at the little things that are happening to create peace. We're only consistently looking at the things that are not happening. So I'm going to get to the questions. Is it possible to have depression without self-harming? Is it possible to have depression? Yes, everybody that is depressed does not self-harm. that's not the case. In depression, when you think about depression, Brad Swatter, depression, you look at it on a spectrum, right? So like at some point, I feel like we've all experienced some form of depression. You know, we could be sad about something, but would it be a diagnosable diagnosis? No. People, like if somebody passes away or something like that, like you can feel sad and you feel depressed, but will you get a diagnosis of major depression? No. And then they have other people that may be struggling more, but everybody that has depression does not self-harm. Sometimes putting other first can be detrimental to our health, and sometimes we don't realize that, or sometimes we don't acknowledge it. Yeah. So sometimes we just don't realize it. And honestly, like Maurice is saying, sometimes we just don't want to acknowledge that that's happening. We want to ignore it. And like I said, you can choose to ignore it. It's always a choice. If anybody follows me on social media, a lot of the statements I put up, I'll say like, what will you choose? The choice is yours, because a lot of us don't feel like we have control. We really feel stuck. And again, feelings is something that is controlled by our thoughts. So if I start to think about my life differently, if I start to think like I do hold the keys to my life, if I start to think like I can make a difference, then guess what's going to happen? I'm not going to feel that way. I'm not going to feel stuck. I'm going to look at my options. I'm going to be very much solution oriented with what I am dealing with. Miss P Love says, I've learned to put me first. As a result, I've lost a lot of people who I once was close with. Is that normal? Oh my gosh, is it normal? I feel like it's part of the blueprint. Nobody talks about this part. Nobody says like, you hear people say like, put yourself first all the time, but nobody talks about what happens when you do that. And I think this is why we tend to stop the process of putting ourselves first, because we start to feel lonely, and we start to feel lonely because some of the relationships and situations we were in are no longer serving us. So we start to back out of it. And because we're backing out of it, now we're learning to be by ourselves and to create new systems for ourselves. And so, some ways to deal with that is to really look at what you're feeling when you are alone. Think about what you're doing to feed your spirit. And when I talk about feeding your spirit, it's not just the people you're around. It could be, what are you reading? What are you listening to? Listening to Celeste the Therapist podcast, you can't go wrong. So those kind of things. How am I eating? Like, what am I eating? Our body is a temple. We only have one body, and we don't really have a health plan for our body. Am I moving my body? What am I sleeping? So really putting that care into yourself, it'll start to be easier to deal with this loss that you're feeling, because it's a real loss. Whether or not they serve you or not, they still were able to fill a piece, a void that you may have thought you were missing. So it's definitely much a part of the process. I feel as if I'm stagnant. Distractions from my past come to mind often. And so now with the pandemic, right, and people aren't working as much, we're not doing the same kind of things. A lot of the stuff from the past comes to our mind. And, a lot of it's being pushed forward because it's always been there. Like I started off the podcast at the beginning, Jerry. A lot of us have tried to suppress these things from our past that we may have dealt with or try not to think about. And when you really think about it, it's like, how could we really run away from our mind? Like, how could you run away from something that's a part of you? And so it's not really possible to do that. You can try, but it's still there. And even if you're not consciously aware of it, it's showing up. So really thinking about the thing that, especially if it's something that is hurtful or feels hard, really thinking about how can I work on processing it, because running away from your suffering creates more suffering. And this is not a skill set that is taught in America. We don't learn this. We just learn to distract and to fill our time with different things. You have a gratitude journal. That's good, that you do every night. That's awesome. Ms. P Love, that's so amazing. Most people in third world countries don't look at what they don't have. Yes, that is so true. And so Jerry's asking, what causes teens to self-harm? So it's not just teens, actually. Adults do it as well. And I think for somebody that's never self-harmed, it's kind of hard to understand, like, why would you want to do something like that? But when you're dealing with depression, I think that some people don't feel it. They feel numb, right? Like when I say it's important to feel the pain, like life, there's pain in life. We have to experience it. Some people have learned to numb, and they've learned to numb because it's hard to feel and no one's helping them process. And so when people are cutting or self-harming themselves, they're actually able to feel. And sometimes, like when you think about depression, you're dealing with the illness that you can't literally see. Like I can't say like, oh yeah, here, this is the depression, right? And so for people that may be struggling, I think that, sometimes they look at the cutting as a way to be like, okay, like I am real, this is pain, this is real. You see the blood, and some people get a rush out of it. And so for people that may have like kids that may be struggling with self-harming, or even if you are really thinking about like what happens prior to you getting ready to cut, because you're feeling something. And so that's something that you're feeling, it's a buildup. It doesn't happen overnight. You may think it happens overnight, but it doesn't happen overnight. There's this buildup that takes place. And so thinking about some other coping mechanisms that you can utilize outside of cutting yourself, because it's unfortunately increasing, especially with teens. And if you're a parent and have kids, one of the things I like to say is to make sure that, you are having consistent dialogue with them. First and foremost, make sure you're taking care of yourself, because you cannot be any good to them if you're not good to yourself. So like really make sure you're taking care of yourself and have authentic conversations with them. Let them know that you're human as well. I think sometimes kids think that we were not kids at one point. And I think that would be helpful for them. So how do you control compulsive thoughts? Compulsive thought process can be like anxiety. And a lot of times, sometimes we just have to like tell ourselves like, stop, especially depending on what the thoughts are. If some of the thoughts have to do with like worrying about the future or dwelling on the past, it's important to ground yourself and get yourself back into the moment, because that's a really great place for anxiety to stay. It loves it when you're worried about the future, which most of us are doing. It loves it when you're dwelling on the past, which most of us are doing. And when you're dwelling on the past, you're allowing that to control your lens on your current life. And, when you think about not being able to be in the moment, you're actually missing out on peace. You can't find peace if you're in the past, or if you're in the future, or trying to figure out the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we know what's going to happen to now, what's happening right now in this moment. And so really thinking about what is bothering me right now in this moment. And a quick way to ground yourself is to really think about like your five senses, to just kind of think about like, okay, like what am I hearing right now? Like, what am I seeing? What am I tasting? A really good practice too, for people that are struggling with like all of these intrusive thoughts, is to create a routine for yourself. Our brain loves routines. And really start to ground yourself, not just when you're struggling with all of these compulsive thoughts, but ground yourself on a regular basis. And I always tell people to try to work on that grounding technique, or something you're trying to implement into your life, with something that you're already doing. So if you're already taking a shower, which I hope most of you are, you can actually work on creating a system where when I get in the shower, this is going to be my grounding time. So I can't tell myself I don't have any time. When I'm brushing my teeth, I'm going to utilize this as my grounding time, right? What am I feeling? What color is my toothbrush? What am I tasting? And so you're forcing yourself to get back into the moment, which is a really powerful place to be. It could be a hard place to be when you really don't want to feel anything, but there's power in being in the moment. There's a lot of power in that. You're welcome, Jared. I'm having a hard time tonight because I'm teaching from home, but I was told I need to return 5 days a week in January. So So in regards to, and teachers have it hard, one of the things that's important, I think, for everybody to realize when we're encountering people is that everybody's dealing with the pandemic, right? We're all, even me as a therapist, like I have to be mindful of that fact, right? I'm walking people through this really hard time that nobody's ever been a part of. And so like, with teachers, it's even more challenging because teachers really do love the kids. Like you would never find me working with kids. I don't want to work with kids. But I think teachers really love the kids. And so you're trying to be there for them. And that could be challenging, because you're in the middle of this as well. So, going back, right, it's a bad timing because cases are rising. Right. And it's a bad timing because cases are rising. And you can't just like quit your job. Like, you know what I mean? Like now survival mode kicks in, you have to survive. And so one thing that's going to be important, hey, Butch, one thing that's going to be important is to really like look at the safety measures that you're taking for yourself, and that the school's taking, when you're going back. So right now we're in November, right? Yeah, we're in November. So you still have 2 months. So try not to get yourself so worked up about January that you're always in this constant state of anxiety. January is going to come, and then as it comes, really thinking about, am I being safe? Like, is the school providing safety measures for me, right? Like if you have a union, definitely like look at that if that's something that the school is not saying they're doing what they said they're going to do. So really keeping that in mind. But it's important to really hone in on what you can control. When things are happening, like if they're saying you got to go back to school and teach 5 days a week, when these things are happening, like what they said is not in your control and you can't just leave your job. And so like what's within your control right now, I know that I'm not in school right now. Right now, I know that I'm safe. So remind yourself that you're safe, because your brain will start to go into overdrive and start to create all of these scenarios that aren't happening, that may not be true. And then you can work yourself up and create all of this anxiety. We're already dealing with the anxiety as it is with the state of the nation. So we don't want to complicate it and then we become our worst enemy because we're in our head about it all the time. So that's something that's important to kind of understand. I teach from home as well. It was difficult at first, but I've developed a routine and it works. Stay as safe as possible when you go back. Focus on what you can control. Yes, Miss P. Love, that's great. It's so important to focus on what you can control. And that's with anybody, whether you're going back into work, whether you're going to the grocery store. A lot of people are having panic attacks, when they leave their house. Everybody's in masks. We're literally living in a different space than we've ever lived before. And this is our current, like what we're looking at, this is what it is. And we can't fight what it is. We have to mourn the loss of the life that we knew to be true, right? We knew this life of no mask, so we have to mourn that. That's a grieving process that we have to go through. And I think some of us haven't went through it. It didn't help that like our government was not as clear as they was about the reality as it started to unfold. And so we had these like false expectations on when life would look like it was before. And so right now we don't know when that's going to be like. So it's really important for us to really focus on the things that's within our control. Thank you, Bush. Does anybody else have any more questions? I appreciate all the questions. These are really important questions. There's no dumb question, especially when it comes to mental health. This is something that I used to do for 2 years, like every single Friday, believe it or not. For a couple years, I would come on and I would, focus on what you can control. I would come on and I would answer all of these questions because I do realize that most of us suffer because we're not educated or not. I'm not talking about school educated. I'm just talking about, like we know if we're bleeding, we go get a Band-Aid, right? And most of us don't know what to do when our mental health, when we're struggling mentally. And so that's why, like, I decided to, kind of do this. That's why I decided to start the podcast. So if you are new in here, the podcast is streaming on all podcasting platforms. Also on YouTube, there's segments of me talking to other people, which is great. Do you offer one-on-one sessions? I do, but currently I'm full, unfortunately. But for people that are like looking for a therapist, really make sure, let me tell you like two ways. One is to call your insurance, ask for a list of therapists. They will reach out and give you a list of therapists. Another one is Psychology Today. For people that may not be able to afford therapy or struggling around that area, there's a really great organization called NAMI, N-A-M-I, National Alliance of Mental Illness. And they have live like Zoom sessions, and you can, mental illness awareness is great. Yes. They have live Zoom sessions where you can go in. You don't even have to put your camera on. You don't have to put your real name on. I spoke at one of the NAMI events on depression and anxiety. It was really good. People said they were glad that they came on. They didn't feel like coming on, especially people who were used to like having a self-care routine that has been completely demolished because things aren't operating the way they were before. And so, mourning the loss of the life that we knew to be true, right? If you were somebody that was in the yoga studio or in the gym, and then trying to like recreate, and maybe that's going to be Zoom, maybe that's going to be YouTube. It's not the ideal situation. But if that is what the system that you had that was keeping you afloat, then you have to go back to the drawing board and really look at, what this new lifestyle is going to look like. And I'm not saying that it's an easy transition, right? It's not. There's nothing easy about the transition. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But it's a necessary transition to make if you want to go from just surviving life to actually living life. And living life is a completely different way to live than it is to survive life. And so, distinguishing between the two, am I living or am I surviving? That's something that is going to be important to understand. Hey, how are you? Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you for catching me live. I'm having trouble finding a good one. I currently have one, but I need one like who gives me strategies. I need strategies. And Crystal, if you are, for people that have a therapist that don't feel like they're getting strategies, it's okay to tell the therapist that. Like, it's okay to be like, hey, I've had people say some things that wasn't working, and I can try to make it work for the person. But it's important to be honest with your therapist about things that aren't working for you, so that you can get what you need out of it. Because the thing about therapy is that everybody says like go to therapy, but they don't tell you about how challenging it could be to find one, how sometimes it's not a good fit. And so that's just the reality. And so don't feel bad that you have to ask a question or ask them to, can you just give me some steps? I really want help with X, Y, and Z. I feel judged by my last therapist. Oh, that's not good. I hope that didn't turn you off from therapy. That's not good at all. That's not the way it's supposed to be. But remember, we're human too. So, and it's okay to tell your therapist that, well, you said last therapist, so you weren't there. But if you are there, it's okay to say like, hey, like when you made that statement, I felt like you was judging me. Like, that's really okay to say. I abruptly stopped seeing her because I felt worse after talking to her. Yes, that was good. Most people are not honest, but that's good that Crystal, Mr. and Crystal, but then Missy, that's good that you stopped, because most people don't stop. They keep going, which isn't good. Hey, Sally, I'm glad to see you. How do we help the kids focus on everyday life in this new environment? I think we can help the kids by making sure we're focusing on life in this everyday moment. Kids pick up on they pick up on what we do, whether we we can't just say it. We actually have to live by it as well. So that's one good thing to remember, and to talk about it, have these open dialogues about it. Life has completely changed for them. And I think adults, we may forget that, because like whether we're dealing with trying to pay our bills, keep our lights on, or just the logisticals of the things that we are dealing with around this new, environment in the world. When we look at them, we may be like, oh, but they're just kids. They don't have to go to school and get up for work, but they're struggling just as much as we are. And so I think that's something that's going to be important. Exactly. Kids pick up on our energy. So it's really important to be like honest. If you're struggling, just like, I'm struggling. How are you feeling? They don't always have the language, depending on how old they are, or even if they're older, they just may not always have the language. So we have to give them the language to be able to express, what's inside. Because unfortunately, what happens is like we start seeing it acting out in their behaviors. So we want to really be mindful on if their behaviors are changing too, really being mindful on not to get so like bogged down and like, why did you do that? And like, depending on the behavior, because the behavior could be a manifestation on what they're feeling. The same way with us as adults, like we freaking act out as well when we're feeling a certain thing. We don't have language to express it. So, get your feelings chart out. I have this feelings chart in my journal. That's more an extensive one, but depending on how old the kid is, you can Google feelings chart and get one that has like 8 faces on it, and really like checking in with them every day, even when they're not struggling. Because you know why? If you only wait till when they're struggling to check in with them, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to want to tell you they're struggling, right? So if you're really having authentic conversations with them, they'll be able to tell you, that they're struggling. Okay, I think I answered all those questions. So that's important for my people who have kids. I hope that makes sense, Sally, with the answer. So it's socially, emotionally challenging. It's so challenging for them, and it's very challenging for them. And I know, and that's why I tell my adults, like, please take care of yourself, because if you're taking care of yourself, your kids are going to know what that looks like and what they should be doing as well. And being honest, that's going to be important. I love it. I have the feelings chart too. I'm going to bring that back when I go back. Yes, good. That's good. That's good. So I really hope this was helpful. I hope that makes sense. I finally caught you live from Louisiana. Oh, hi. How are you? I'm glad you caught me live. I'm happy you found my channel as well. So Mondays and Thursdays, I come on live on the podcast. So you can catch me interviewing somebody. Next week, we're talking about relationships. There's always a different topic. Every now and then I'll come on and I'll do this where I'll answer questions about mental health. There's no wrong answer. You are so welcome. You're so welcome, Missy. There's no wrong question to ask. And I always encourage you, if you're struggling, to really, you're welcome. If you're struggling, good. If you're struggling, I really want you to ask yourself, like, how am I feeling? Like, what's affecting me in this moment? And I've read this amazing book called The Power of Now. Depending on where you are mentally, it can be a really great book for you. If you're at the beginning stages, it may be hard, but Eckhart Tolle wrote this book called The Power of Now. And I'll never forget reading one part where he said, like, you're in the grocery store and there's not enough lines and you're waiting in line and there's this long line and you're like so upset because there's not enough cash registers open. And he said, like, what's the point of getting all upset about there not being enough lines? Like, are you going to be able to create more lines? Why not just use that time in line to read a magazine or think about what you have going on next? And, that like statement, like changed my outlook for when I'm at the grocery store. Like now I see people like, oh, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God, they're wasting so much energy. And, I just think it, cause I can see it. I can see people get so upset. And so when you think about the power of now, thinking about what is within your control. No, you spelled it right, I think. Why stress over anything? That's a great question. But most of us aren't taught how to deal with the stresses that happen in life. When we're growing up, a lot of times if we're like sad about something, our parents will be like, what are you sad about for? You have food, you have clothes, right? And they think about all these physical things that we're having and they don't think about how emotionally we're feeling. And it's not about whose fault it is that we don't understand certain things, because at this point, it's our responsibility, to make sure that we're okay. And so once I start to think about what's happening in this moment, that's really changed my outlook on life. I really have this sense of peace despite what happens around me, because I'm really focusing on the things that I only can focus on. And that's the only thing I can do. Yes, we have to learn. We have to learn that practice. It's a great practice to learn. And you can't pay to have this practice inside of you. It's something that you really have to do. You have to work hard on. Hey, Pink Petty, you really have to work hard on. You really have to do. You cannot jump over the process. You have to go through the process. And the more these situations come, you're checking in with yourself. You're recreating your environment, right? Your environment is going to help you really have more peace of mind, right? It's not just the people in your life, but it's what you're doing, how you're treating your body. Are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Right? What's your nighttime routine, right? Is it to just watch Netflix until 2 and 3 in the morning and not have any real systems in the morning, even if you're not working? You can create systems in your life. It's a really important thing. Our brain loves structure. I can't say that enough. Our brain loves structure. And so you have to give it some type of structure. That part, I don't know. Are there any good books for teens who suffer from anxiety? I'm not sure. But Therapy for Black Girls, Dr. Joy, I don't know if anybody's heard of her podcast, really good podcast. And she has an Amazon, she has therapist. She only has therapists on her platform. And she has an Amazon list of books that she recommends. And if you go to her recommended books, therapyforblackgirls.com, go to her recommended books. And she has a lot of great books. Because I don't work with kids, I'm not really knowledgeable around the different actual material that's available for them. But there's some available for them. And so if you really know a teen, you have a teen that's struggling, don't chalk it up to it being, oh, they're a teenager, really try to be a little bit more open, especially, some parents may think I had it bad. You don't have it as bad as I have it. And we cannot compare where we are in life with where they are in life, because they're dealing with so much. If something happened at school, something happened at school. I wasn't coming home to what happened in school, right? So the pressures they have, it may seem minuscule to us, but we're 2 different age ranges. So please try not to do that, because that's not fair. Why are systems good for our brain? Is it grounding? Is it grounding a routine? Yes, the routines. What I notice, a lot of people I get are ending college or just finished college, and they start to struggle more. When we go to school, we got elementary, middle school, high school. We know what's next, right? There's this structure and routine built in. By the time people get to college or finish school, sometimes they struggle because oh my God, what am I going to do? And it's nothing's changed other than the fact that they're about to graduate college or get out of school. But now it's oh, what's next? And so our brain operates well when it's structured. Our system could be structured off of dysfunction, right? So some people are used to just being in dysfunctional relationships, dysfunctional life. So some of us, our brain structure is dysfunction. And so when you try, and that's another thing, when you try to add function into your life, like a healthy system, understand that your body may try to reject that lifestyle because it's something foreign to its life. And so you're going to feel like you're in a real battle, where you're trying to make these changes. You're going to be like, yo, Celeste told me I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm trying to do it, but I feel like my body's rejecting it. It's going to reject it. And that's okay. Just understand that, the more you do it, the more your brain's going to be like, all right, Celeste is really trying to do this healthy lifestyle thing. So we're going to have to fall in line and get with the program. So don't give up because it doesn't feel like it's working. It's not going to feel that way right away, but eventually it will. Okay. I have some students who refuse to speak among their peers, so online working is good for them. Yes, a lot of people that struggled in school, some people are actually doing better online, and then some that did better in school are actually struggling online, which is really interesting. They do not have a lot of kids. Maybe I should. Oh, yeah, that would be good, Crystal. You're welcome. I do have a lot of teachers. I had a segment on where I had a principal on and teachers, and I was actually surprised to see a lot of teachers as well. I have a lot of teacher followers. This makes sense. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. Does anxiety ever go away? Really interesting question. So when I think about people that struggle with anxiety, and some people get comfortably uncomfortable living with anxiety, meaning that they could be at baseline, they're anxious all the time. And yes, the replay is going to be up. They may be anxious all the time. And the moment they start to work on their anxiety, it starts to alleviate where they understand their triggers. My people that have diagnoses of anxiety, I always say you can't afford not to pay attention to what's happening or not pay attention to your routines, whether that's medication or whether that's the way that you're going about your day. Some people know, like, I got to exercise. I can't eat this much stuff. I can't do this. People get really in touch with their body, and it helps actually alleviate the anxiety. I mean, we will experience some form of anxiety, but does it have to be debilitating? I think for some people, it can be very debilitating where it stops them from doing certain things. And because, anxiety and depression, they're bipolar, like these things are very stigmatized. And so people tend to suffer in silence. And so don't suffer in silence, because you'll be surprised. So many people are dealing with the same things. And guess what? The people that you're concerned about judging you, or, they don't have to walk in your shoes. Anxiety is a very hard illness to live with. And people don't have to live with it like that. So it's not about, when you say it's going away, it's not going to be feeling like the control of your life, like you're waking up anxiety, go to sleep anxiety. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be something that you can really work through with the right tools and support. I am leaving the replay up. So the replay will be up on, Periscope, it stays up. You're on Periscope, yeah. And then YouTube, you can subscribe on YouTube too, and get it easier that way. Does it take years for your body to fall in line? That's a great question. So I can't say there's a time frame. I wouldn't say years. I think people with their consistency have this like aha moment. So when I meet with people, it's not like they're in a session one day and they're like, oh my gosh, like I get it. Sometimes that happens, but sometimes it's between the session and between them reading or between them journaling, and that something happens and they start to get it. They say it takes 21 days to form a habit. I don't give a time frame on the time frame that it does take, but I do know that eventually it starts to take effect. And it may not be as consistent, but it's important to focus on the small wins. I think sometimes we want to be up here, right? We want to be at this level where it's like, oh, like we're not really affected, like we're just walking around all this peace. It takes a while to get to that point. But I do think that there are moments in our life where we have these small wins, and unfortunately we're not celebrating them. So really work on like celebrating those small wins. When you want to cuss this person out and you realize, like, I took a step back and I said, I'm not going to give them that power. That's a win, especially if you was used to cussing that person out before. So really thinking about that is going to be important. I feel like I'm headed in the right direction, and something happens, and something's going to always happen. Something's going to always happen because life happens, right? And so it's like, how do we deal with the things as they come to us? And that's going to be the key, is understanding how to deal with it as it comes. So I hope that was helpful. This was really, really good. I appreciate all of the involvement. Make sure CelesteTherapist.com, you can find me there. And this is the podcast. This is what it looks like. Shifting the Way You Think on Apple, SoundCloud, everywhere, Spotify. If you have Spotify, you can find me on that. I have this like wellness assessment. So if you're somebody, one of the things about when we struggle is that we will, it can feel like, oh my gosh, everything is going so wrong, right? And if we actually start to break it down, we'll see that it's not happening in every area of our lives. We'll start to, like, when we break it down, we'll be like, actually, I am doing well in this area or that area. So it's going to be important, I think, for us to really sit down. And this is something, some people do this, this kind of will every, couple of weeks. They have it up when they're struggling. They're like, okay, what's going on physically? Am I okay? How am I feeling intellectually? I break all this down. If you go to where is it at? Yeah, if you go to celesthetherapist.com and you will see you'll see it under courses. It's a 10-minute video thing that I do. If you go there, you can watch me again. It's free, where I go over these different sections and how you can work on really honing in on the areas that you're struggling with, because there are some areas that we're doing well in. And I think it's going to be important for us to acknowledge that, right? It's important for us to acknowledge where we're doing well, because it could be like all or nothing. When things are hard, it feels like everything's hard, when it may not be as bad as it feels like, because remember, our thoughts, feelings, behavior, all of it's connected. So thank you guys for coming on and rocking out with me. I'll be back on Thursday. We'll be talking to somebody, so I'm excited about that. If you want to be on the podcast, all you got to do is email me, admin, ADMIN, @celesthetherapist.com. If you have a question that you would like answered, info@celesthetherapist.com. Also, January, I am going to be doing a 3-month group where we are working on shifting the way you think. So this community is going to be for people who are looking for accountability, ways to help them think differently. I'm using a book called Healing the Inner Child to do this course, where you'll get weekly video homework lessons, and you'll also get live once a month classes from me. A really good program. It's about to end in November, and it restarts in January. So if you want to be a part of that community, go to shiftingthewayouthink.com. I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else. That's super important. There are mental health lessons in my county. Yes. Oh, you was telling me that. I really wish that we would start working on mental health in school. It should be a part of the curriculum, because you know what? When I am able to express how I'm feeling, I'm not going to allow all of these things to affect me. And so if we can really teach the kids that, right, especially with the emotion, that I'm so big on emotions, like how are you feeling, right? If my kid's upset she can't have a cookie, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's just a cookie. What are you mad about? If she's 6 years old mad about a cookie, of course that's why she's mad, because she's 6 and cookies are a big deal to her. So like, we really have to be mindful on the way that we are teaching our kids, because we could be possibly teaching them to suppress the hard feelings. Only express when you're okay. And that's just not okay with me. Who wrote the book? So the book is called, this book is so good. It's I don't know how to pronounce his name. Thich Nhat Hanh. I think his name is like that. But Healing the Inner Child. And hey, AP. And with the inner child, I'll leave at this. Y'all know I could talk about mental health all day. But one thing I'll say about mental health is that, the inner child, most of us are operating from a inner child's perspective, like a really hurt, traumatized child, where we can feel like a victim, or we feel like hurt, we feel so pain, and it's because we haven't integrated, and it's a hard concept to understand, because it's like, integrate what? I'm Celeste. I'm this 38-year-old person, and I can still be triggered from the things that have happened in my past, but because I'm cognizant of it, I'm able to understand, where I am. And right now I'm okay. Right now I'm safe. And so most of us could be 38 years old, but have an 8-year-old emotional mentality. And most of us don't even understand this, And so, so this is a really good book for that, to help you like kind of work through it. And so I break this book down into 12 weeks, with homework assignments, and then we do our live Zoom classes to go with it. So go to shiftingthewayouthink.com if you want to put your name on the wait list. That's going to be important. I'm so triggered by my trauma, but a work in progress. Yes, that's good. The title of the book is called Reconciliation. And if you go to Shifting the Way I don't know if it's on the website, but here's the book. And I have a list of books that I've recommended. If you go to Amazon, I'm gonna have all these links because I can't think of where everything is. But this is one of the books I highly recommend to do. Or 58 years. So thank you guys so much. Y'all know I love y'all so much. Everybody that's been rocking out with me, hey Jared. Oh my gosh, I gotta go, guys. It's nice to see you. What age group do you teach? So only adults, so 18 and over. So I'll be back Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Follow me on all social media platforms. I'm very active on social media. All you got to do is search Celeste the Therapist. If you want to be on the show, email me. If you have a show idea, email me. Love you guys, and I will talk to you later.
Smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste the Therapist. Let's go.